I never thought my family could betray me the way they did, especially the people I was supposed to trust the most. My name is Alaric Vinnett, and for years I lived in the shadows of a legacy that wasn't mine until the day everything changed. What started as a simple memorial for my grandfather turned into a nightmare of secrets, lies, and a fight to reclaim what was rightfully mine. There were moments when I felt completely invisible, erased from the history I belonged to, and other moments when the truth threatened to destroy everything they tried to hide. If you're ready to hear a story about betrayal, courage, and justice, stick with me. Don't forget to like and subscribe so you don't miss a single moment, and share where you're watching from and what you think in the comments below. I want to hear your thoughts as this unfolds. This is my story, and it's far from over. My stepmother Clarabelle whispered to my brother, "If Alaric finds out about the forged will copy, we're finished." At the memorial, I noticed my face had been cut out from the family portrait. No one explained why. I received the email exactly 36 hours before the memorial. It wasn't an invitation. It was a command. Grandpa's memorial. Beyond time. Don't embarrass us. No greeting. No condolence. No warmth. Just cold instructions from Clarabelle, the woman who had been in my life for 24 years yet treated me like a houseplant someone forgot to water. I stared at the screen of my phone, rereading it in disbelief, then set it down on my desk and reached for the leather folder I hadn't opened in years, the one that held Grandpa's letters. I pulled out the last one, written in slanted cursive on thick stationery, the kind he kept in a locked drawer and only used for things that truly mattered. In that letter, he wrote, "Never trust a performance. Trust actions. And if someone tries to write you out, write yourself back in." At the time, I thought he was being philosophical. Now I felt it was a warning. I arrived in Astoria after a 5-hour train ride and a long, silent cab ride through the wet, winding roads. The estate was exactly as I remembered, majestic, stone-faced, quietly judging. It sat on a cliff that overlooked the ocean like it didn't care if the world ended, as long as it didn't disturb its view. The hedges were clipped like military ranks, the roses in perfect bloom. But the air felt thick, like the house itself was holding its breath. The woman who opened the front door wasn't family. She wore a headset and carried a clipboard, and she looked at me like I was late for an appointment I hadn't booked. "Name?" she asked. "Alaric Vinnett," I replied. Her eyes flicked to the list. "You're not on the guest registry," she said. "Clarabelle said you might show up. You'll be in the attic room. No access to the study or the West Wing. Meals are buffet style in the conservatory. Please don't disturb the scheduled events." I wanted to tell her that I grew up in this house, that I used to sneak cookies from the kitchen and watch thunderstorms with Grandpa from the very conservatory she just mentioned. But I said nothing. Inside, the house buzzed not with grief, but with energy. Calculating, polished, transactional energy. Guests sipped champagne from tall flutes and spoke in hushed tones about real estate markets and wine import licenses. Every corner echoed with quiet ambition. I was barely inside before I spotted Beaumont holding court near the piano, surrounded by guests in tailored suits. "Grandpa left me the Steinway," he declared proudly. "Said I was the only one who ever played it like it meant something." Laughter followed. I remembered Grandpa begging him to practice scales. Beaumont hated music, but truth didn't matter here, only optics. I walked into the parlor and stopped cold. The portrait above the fireplace had changed. It was the famous Vinnett family portrait, taken during the winter of 2014. Everyone had stood in matching coats and soft smiles. Grandpa had insisted I stand next to him. "I want my boy beside me," he said, pulling me close. But now, I wasn't in the picture. My spot had been replaced by a vase of silk orchids. Seamless edit. Whoever did it knew exactly what they were doing. My chest tightened. Someone was erasing me. As I turned away, I heard voices behind the door to the library. Clarabelle's tone was sharp and low. "If Alaric finds out about the forged will copy, we're finished." I froze behind the column, breath caught. "He was always close to Dad," she continued. "Too close. I don't like it." "Relax," Beaumont said. "He's a coward. Always has been. We'll just keep him in the attic, keep him out of the loop, and in 72 hours it'll all be over. Just make sure the drawer in the study stays locked, Clarabelle snapped. The originals are in there. If he sees them, it's over. I backed away silently, mind spinning. A forged will? Originals in the study? They were hiding something. I knew Grandpa had a will drawn up by Horace Ling, the most meticulous attorney this state had ever seen. Grandpa used to joke, if Horace writes it, not even the devil can contest it. So why were they so afraid of me finding something? That night I sat in the attic room, once my childhood sanctuary, now stripped bare. The books were gone, the toy chest empty, the curtains replaced by plain gray sheets. It smelled like dust and dried paint. I tried to call Horace Ling, but the number had been disconnected. His office line rang endlessly before a robotic voice said the line was no longer in service. I searched online. No website, no forwarding address, nothing. He'd vanished. Just like that. The next morning, I walked into the conservatory for breakfast. The buffet table was laid out like a luxury hotel. Croissants, imported cheese, exotic fruit. I wasn't hungry. Clarabelle stood near the espresso machine, smiling for a photographer from the local magazine. Beaumont strutted in with a robe and sunglasses like a trust fund celebrity. We're setting up a trust for the vineyard, Clarabelle announced to a small group. Beaumont will take charge. Daddy always said he had business instincts. I couldn't help myself. I stepped forward. Did Grandpa say that before or after Beaumont crashed his startup in Seattle? The room fell silent. Clarabelle turned, that perfect social smile cracking for half a second. Alaric, darling, she said through her teeth, why don't you enjoy the garden? Here's a koi pond now. Very relaxing. I left the room, my heart thudding. I found Junie on the back patio, sketching with a charcoal pencil. She always stayed out of the spotlight. Did they read the will? I asked. She didn't look up. And just like that, I became the topic of polite dismissal in my own grandfather's house. I stood a few feet away, blending into the shadows by the French doors, pretending to study the waves crashing against the cliffside below. No one noticed me, or if they did, they didn't care enough to break their social rhythm. It was as if I was part of the wallpaper, silent, still, and entirely unimportant. That morning had already started with a sting I hadn't yet recovered from. I came down to the main dining hall expecting, perhaps foolishly, to find a seat at the long table with the family. Instead, I found my name scribbled on a card placed beside the children's table in the breakfast nook. Tiny chairs, plastic cups, and leftover juice boxes. I wasn't even afforded the dignity of adult furniture. When I gently moved the card to the main table, Clarabelle glanced up from her conversation and said with sugary sharpness, "Oh, Alaric, that place is for guests who are part of the board discussions. We didn't want you to feel out of place. The nook's more comfortable for quiet types." Then she winked, as if humiliating me was an act of mercy. Beaumont raised his glass in my direction and added, "Don't worry, bro. It's got the best view of the garden. Can't beat that." The group laughed. I sat in silence, unable to taste anything on my plate. Every word, every gesture was a layer of dismissal wrapped in fake smiles and polished veneers. I had always known Clarabelle didn't care for me, but this felt strategic, calculated, as if there was a narrative being constructed and I was being ridden out of it in real time. Later, I retreated to the library hoping to find some fragment of Grandpa that had survived the social charade overtaking the estate. I checked the usual places, behind the third shelf, inside the faux encyclopedia casing, under the globe, but everything had been stripped clean. The journals were gone. The letters were gone. Even the small photo of me and Grandpa fishing in Idaho, which had sat on his desk for years, had vanished. It was as if he'd never loved me, as if he'd never existed. I opened the drawer of the desk he used for writing and found a single envelope, empty, with my name written in his cursive. Nothing inside. Just my name, alone on paper. Was this all that was left of me in this house? Just echoes? That afternoon, while everyone gathered in the music room for what they called an informal toast to legacy, I lingered outside the door, invisible to the world I'd been born into. Beaumont stood beside the grand piano, delivering what could only be described as a staged eulogy wrapped in financial optimism. Grandpa believed in refinement, in heritage. He wanted his instruments to go to someone who understood them, someone who would preserve the tone, the artistry, the message of continuity. I am humbled to be chosen. Clarabelle dabbed at her eyes with a lace handkerchief, her voice thick with emotion as she added, "And it's not just the piano. The vineyard, the estate's private shares, even the eastern parcels. Grandpa trusted Beaumont's vision." Everyone clapped softly, respectfully, as if this wasn't a staged performance, but a sacred passing of the torch. I wondered if anyone else saw it. If anyone else felt the tension beneath the tablecloths and the rehearsed gratitude. I stepped away before they noticed me watching. Out on the patio, Junie found me again. "They're rewriting history," I said. She nodded. "I know." I turned to her. "Did Grandpa really say all those things about Beaumont?" She hesitated. "He said Beaumont was ambitious. That's it. He said you were the only one who understood silence." My chest tightened. I leaned closer and asked, "Do you think the will was real?" She didn't respond. Her silence spoke louder than any words. That evening, I was asked to help set the table for dinner, not by a staff member, but by Clarabelle herself. "You don't mind, do you?" she said sweetly. "You've always been so good with the details." She handed me a stack of linen napkins like I was the hired help. I wanted to refuse, to scream, to tear everything down, but instead I folded napkins like they were weapons and placed them beside plates of people who didn't know I existed. Beaumont made another speech during dessert. "I've been speaking with the lawyers," he announced. "There's going to be a formal announcement about the estate's restructuring. As executor, I'll make sure everything aligns with Grandpa's wishes." I coughed loudly. Every eye turned to me. "You're the executor?" I asked. Clarabelle smiled. Horace Ling passed it to him. They walked around like they owned the air, spreading half-truths with expensive smiles. Clarabelle's favorite line had become, "Your grandfather wasn't well toward the end," whispered with just enough sadness to sound believable. At first, I brushed it off as her usual condescension, but now I realized it was part of a bigger manipulation. She was setting a stage where anything Grandpa had written or done late in life could be dismissed as senility. But Grandpa wasn't senile. He was meticulous. A retired Navy engineer, a chess player, a man who labeled everything he owned down to the contents of his fishing tackle box. His mind had been sharper at 85 than most people at 40. The claim that he had suddenly gone foggy in his final year was not only suspicious, it was insulting. The next morning, while everyone prepared for another catered lunch on the back lawn, I slipped away toward the old tool shed near the cliffs. It was the one place no one bothered to renovate because, according to Clarabelle, it smells like mildew and bad memories. To me, it smelled like the truth. Inside, cobwebs danced in the sunlight, slicing through warped wooden planks. Old bird feeders, rusted tools, and faded garden markers cluttered the walls. But behind a broken ladder, where Grandpa once kept his tackle and bait, I found something taped to the inside of a cabinet door, a small, waterproof pouch. Inside, it was a worn sketch pad with Grandpa's initials. My breath caught. It was filled with hand-drawn maps, property outlines, detailed notes on land assessments, and diagrams. There was even a crude family tree. Each entry was dated and labeled with astonishing clarity. The last note on the final page read, "If they claim I was confused, let these pages correct them." I sat on a crate, flipping through it slowly. Grandpa had detailed meetings with his lawyer, referenced conversations he had with me, and even left sticky notes reminding himself to mention Alaric's role in the scholarship trust. This wasn't the writing of a senile man. This was a mind preparing for a storm. I tucked the sketchpad into my coat and returned to the house just as lunch began. Clarabelle had transformed the backyard into what looked like a luxury magazine spread. White linen, crystal glasses, a harpist plucking strings beneath a rented gazebo. "Alaric, darling," she said when she noticed me approaching. "Don't just hover. Grab a plate." The crab cakes are divine. I ignored her. My eyes locked on Beaumont, who was showing some of the guests a laminated printout. It's a copy of Grandpa's will, he said, waving it proudly. It's straightforward. Everything goes into a trust. I'm the primary executor, of course. The estate is being streamlined. No surprises. He glanced at me with a smile that said he expected me to slink away quietly. Instead, I walked up and asked, "Can I see that?" He froze. "What?" "The will," I said louder, drawing attention. "I'd like to see it. A real copy, not a brochure version for the gallery crowd." Clarabelle jumped in. "Alaric, this isn't the time. We're entertaining guests." "Exactly," I said. "And I'd like to understand the legacy everyone keeps toasting to." Beaumont looked around, realizing he couldn't refuse without looking like he had something to hide. "Fine," he muttered, handing me the page. I studied it carefully. It was a single page devoid of official stamps, dates, or attorney signatures. It looked like something made for a school project. "Is there a notarized version?" I asked. "Something with Horace Ling's seal." Beaumont's jaw tightened. "That's the copy we were given. The original is being processed for formal registry." I turned to Clarabelle. "And where's Horace now?" She tilted her head, feigning confusion. "I told you. He retired. Florida. No forwarding number." "So no one can verify this?" I asked. "Except you?" Silence stretched across the table. The harpist kept playing, blissfully unaware. "Alaric," Clarabelle finally said with steel in her voice, "you're upsetting the harmony of the day." I folded the page and handed it back. "Good. Maybe it's time someone did." That night, I returned to the shed and made copies of Grandpa's sketchpad pages using the printer in the estate's old office, the one now off limits. I knew the passcode because Grandpa never changed it. 1942, the year he enlisted. The office smelled like new leather and forced legacy. Inside, I found more red flags. Filing cabinets emptied out. Photos replaced. Even the bookshelf had been rearranged to feature books Clarabelle preferred, ones about wine pairings and European estates. The sketchpad notes, however, confirmed something else. Grandpa had made a revised will on August 19th of the previous year, the same date on the envelope. That couldn't be a coincidence. I checked the calendar. 2 days from now marked 1 year exactly, and that meant one thing. The revision had legal weight if it could be produced. But that also meant someone had gone to great lengths to ensure it never surfaced. As I left the office, I ran into one of the servers, a young woman named Tessa, who had worked the estate events for years. "You used to come here every summer," she said quietly. "Mr. Vinnet always asked for you when we set up his chair by the window." I nodded. "Did he seem confused to you last year?" She frowned. "Confused? No. He was sharp. Said he had plans. Said big changes were coming and that not everyone would like them." I gripped the folder tighter. "Did he say anything about a will?" She glanced over her shoulder, then leaned in. "He asked me to mail something once. Said it had to go to the state records office. But Clarabelle saw me with it and took it. Said she'd handle it. He looked upset after that. Told me to be careful who I trusted." My destination was the old greenhouse that sat at the edge of the property, abandoned for years and overtaken by ivy and dust. Grandpa used to grow herbs and heirloom tomatoes in there, but Clarabelle said it made the grounds look unkempt, so it had become another neglected corner of his legacy. I pushed the rusted door open, and the smell of soil and decay welcomed me like an old friend. Inside, shards of broken terracotta pots littered the ground, and the far wall bore a faded quote in Grandpa's handwriting: "The roots don't lie." I followed the faint path of tiles to the back, where beneath a row of overturned planters, I discovered a large metal toolbox, old, dented, but locked tight. I recognized the 3-digit code etched into the side: 142. That was my birthday. When I opened it, I found layers of folded papers, old film negatives, and a bundle of letters addressed to AV, my initials. The top letter read, "If you're reading this, then the vultures got here first." But they didn't get everything. My hand shook as I unfolded the pages. Inside were receipts, transaction logs, handwritten statements, even a notarized acknowledgement from Horace Ling that referenced a revision to the will, August 19th. My eyes scanned faster. These weren't notes. They were evidence. Grandpa had built a paper trail, an insurance policy, and somehow it had survived their sweep. My phone buzzed. Bitfasuni. Her text was short. "They're announcing estate divisions at brunch. Be here." I stuffed everything into my coat and sprinted back. By the time I arrived, the estate's dining hall had been transformed again. This time it was set up like a corporate presentation. A projector screen hung on the back wall. Clarabelle stood in front of it in a silk blazer, and Beaumont was sipping orange juice like he hadn't just rewritten family history. "Good morning, everyone," Clarabelle began, her voice warm but firm. "We want to take this opportunity to outline the stewardship plan Grandpa designed before his passing. It reflects his wishes and long-term vision for the Vinnet legacy." I slipped in through the side door unnoticed. Clarabelle clicked the button, and the screen displayed pie charts, estate valuations, and trust fund allocations. The vineyards, art collection, and coastal properties will be consolidated under Vinnet Holdings, LLC, with Beaumont serving as managing partner. Additional assets, including the mineral rights and intellectual property, she gestured toward the piano, are assigned in accordance with Grandpa's outline. "Which outline?" I called from the back. Every head turned. Clarabelle didn't miss a beat. "Alaric," she said, almost surprised. "Glad you could join us." "Which outline?" I repeated, "because I have something here that tells a different story." I stepped forward, pulling out the notarized document from Horace. "This is signed and dated August 19th. It confirms Grandpa's intent to revise the will and redistribute the estate." A murmur spread. Beaumont took a step forward. "That's fake. Anyone can print a letterhead." "Maybe," I said, "but Grandpa didn't forge Horace Ling's notary stamp. You want to see the full document trail? It's all here, including proof that this so-called corporate rollout has nothing to do with Grandpa's real wishes." Clarabelle raised her hand. "Alaric, this isn't the time or place." "No," I cut her off. "This is exactly the time. You've all stood here pretending to honor a man while erasing the truth he died trying to protect." I dropped the evidence on the buffet table. Plates clattered. Conversation stopped. Later, after the guests had left in awkward silence and the staff began clearing the remains of the confrontation, Junie found me in the study, staring at the fire that wasn't lit. "They'll try to deny it," she said. "They'll claim Grandpa was confused, that the documents were manipulated." "Let them try," I said, "because what I found in the greenhouse is just the start." She looked confused. I handed her one of the letters. Her eyes widened. "You mean there's more?" "A lot more. Film negatives, receipts. And these aren't just notes. They're records. Some of them go back years. And they all lead to one thing. Someone's been moving money around, buying property in Grandpa's name, and redirecting resources away from the scholarship programs he supported." Junie stepped back in shock. "That's embezzlement." "Exactly," I said. "And guess whose signatures appear on several authorizations?" Her mouth opened slightly. She didn't have to say the name. We both knew. Clarabelle. I spent the rest of the day cataloging the documents, scanning them into digital format, and storing copies in multiple locations: email, cloud drives, a USB I taped under the attic desk drawer. I wasn't taking chances. That night, I returned to the storage shed one last time, retracing the instructions Grandpa had sketched in the margins of his notes. After the confrontation yesterday, I expected them to attack, to counter with legal threats or passive-aggressive posturing, but instead they went quiet, too quiet. That silence wasn't surrender, it was calculation. Clarabelle was regrouping. I knew her too well to believe otherwise. She wasn't the kind of woman to collapse after being exposed. She was the kind of woman who sharpened knives in the dark and waited for you to turn around. Junie and I spent the morning reviewing Grandpa's video footage, watching him spell out the full scope of the betrayal. He explained how he discovered discrepancies in the trust accounts and how certain parcels of land had been sold off using forged authorization letters. They thought I wouldn't notice, he said, voice low but steady, but I built this empire with precision. Every nail, every signature. I knew when something was wrong. He detailed how Clarabelle used shell companies to mask transfers and how Beaumont, acting as a proxy, had rerouted dividends into personal accounts disguised as operational expenses. I didn't raise a thief, Grandpa had said, bitterness thick in his voice, but apparently I welcomed one into the family. Junie sat in stunned silence. This is criminal, she whispered. They could go to jail. If the system works, I replied, but even as I said it, I knew Clarabelle had influence in places that didn't operate on justice alone. Still, I had the truth. I had Grandpa's voice. I had records, timestamps, and legal documents that even the most expensive lawyer couldn't scrub clean. Around noon, I received an email from a law firm I didn't recognize. The subject line read, "Immediate cease and desist defamation warning." Inside was a letter filled with legal jargon accusing me of slander, harassment, and emotional distress toward the Vennett family. I laughed out loud. Clarabelle had fired her first shot. I forwarded the email to a journalist friend in Portland and attached select pages of Grandpa's notes. Not for publication yet, I wrote, but I may need you soon. I then forwarded everything to a probate attorney I found through Junie's law school contact, someone who specialized in contested wills. Within the hour, I received a call. The attorney's voice was calm but intrigued. "This is serious documentation," she said. "If what you found is authentic, you're not only entitled to contest the current will, you're in a position to invalidate it entirely." "How long would that take?" I asked. "Depends on the court," she replied. "But if the video is admissible and the notary is confirmed, it could shift everything." I stepped outside, heart pounding. The sun was out, but the estate looked like a painting left in the rain, beautiful, but fading at the edges. That's when I saw them, Clarabelle and Beaumont, arguing quietly by the garden. I couldn't hear the words, but her posture was unmistakable, shoulders tense, hands slicing the air in frustration. Beaumont looked like a boy being scolded, nodding too quickly, glancing nervously toward the house. I moved to the side and activated the camera on my phone. Their voices were faint, but I caught a few key phrases. "You said no one would find it. Was locked. How could I know? We have to shut him down. Can't risk the board hearing about this." I saved the video and backed away. They were unraveling. That evening, Clarabelle finally emerged for dinner. She wore her pearls and a charcoal dress, her hair swept into a perfect chignon. Her smile was intact, but it didn't reach her eyes. "Family," she began, raising her glass, "this week has been full of emotion. And though we've faced certain distractions, I want us to remember the love and leadership Grandpa gave us." I stared at her, seething. "Is that before or after you tried to erase him?" The glass in her hand didn't tremble. "Alaric," she said smoothly, "this isn't the time for theatrics." "No," I said, "but it is time for the truth." I stood up and played Grandpa's video on my phone. His voice filled the dining room. Guests froze. Forks clinked against china. Clarabelle's face drained of color. "If you're watching this, someone tried to silence me," Grandpa said on the recording. "But the truth has a way of surfacing." When it ended, no one said a word. Clarabelle reached for her wine, but her hand missed the glass. Beaumont stood abruptly and left the room. Junie turned to me. "You just set the house on fire." "No," I whispered. "I just opened the curtains." But I wasn't celebrating. Not yet. Because exposing the truth was one thing, proving it in court was another, and I knew Clarabelle wasn't going down without setting a few fires of her own. She'd spent decades perfecting her image, hosting charity galas, endowing scholarships, building alliances in high places. Her influence was a currency she spent with precision, and that meant if she couldn't destroy me outright, she'd make me look unstable, ungrateful, and unworthy. I was preparing backup copies of everything, Documents, audio, the video files, when Junie knocked on the attic door with a look that told me something had cracked. "You need to come downstairs," she said. I followed her into the solarium where Clarabelle, dressed in cream cashmere and pearls, was speaking softly to a group of longtime family friends. She smiled as we entered, her expression calm, but her eyes gleamed with quiet malice. "Alaric," she said sweetly, "we were just talking about how much your grandfather valued family harmony. It's unfortunate how quickly things spiral when private matters are made public." I said nothing, but she continued. "You know, your grandfather worried about you. He mentioned your mood swings, said you were intense, prone to imagining betrayal." My jaw tightened. "Are you suggesting I fabricated his video?" She laughed lightly, waving a hand. "No, darling, but grief can do strange things. And editing software these days? Remarkable." I turned to the group. "You all knew my grandfather. You know he was lucid. You know he was precise." One of the older women, Aunt Maureen, shifted in her seat. "Clarabelle, I remember Charles telling me he updated his will last summer. Why wasn't that version shown?" Clarabelle didn't miss a beat, because there wasn't a formal filing. Just drafts and scattered notes. Nothing legally binding. "That's a lie," I said calmly. "I have a notarized letter from Horace Lang confirming the revised filing. It was intercepted before being submitted." Clarabelle smiled again. "Intercepted? By whom?" "You," I said. "You told the staff you'd handle the envelope personally." Tessa remembers. That was when Beaumont walked in. He looked pale, his usual cocky energy replaced with a jittery defensiveness. "We should all just calm down," he said. "We're family. We don't need to drag this into some courtroom circus." "That's exactly where it's going," I said. "Because crimes were committed." His face darkened. "You're bluffing." I didn't reply. I didn't need to, because that was when Junie pulled out a manila folder and placed it on the table. Inside were printed screenshots of account transfers, company registrations, and forged digital signatures, all tied to Beaumont. Clarabelle's fingers twitched as she reached for the documents, but Junie pulled them back. "These are copies. Originals are in legal custody." Clarabelle's smile vanished. "You think loyalty means nothing, don't you?" she said quietly, her voice suddenly bitter. "You think it's all about righteousness and truth. But let me tell you something about loyalty, Alaric. It has a price, and your grandfather never paid it." "No," I replied, "because he believed loyalty should be earned, not bought." The room fell into heavy silence. After the guests left, I found Beaumont pacing near the stables. He lit a cigarette with shaking hands, something he hadn't done since college. "Why are you doing this?" he asked without turning. "Because Grandpa trusted me," I said. "He trusted both of us once." "You chose greed." He laughed bitterly. "Easy for you to say. You had nothing to lose." "You had everything," I snapped. "You had his name, his ear, his favor, for years, and you threw it away." He turned, face twisted. "He never loved me the way he loved you. He humored me. But you? You were his legacy. I saw it every time he looked at you. Because I couldn't win," he shouted. "Not without help. Not without her." He meant Clarabelle. Of course he did. He crushed the cigarette under his heel and walked off, and I stood there in the dirt, the smell of ash and betrayal clinging to the morning air. That night, Junie and I reviewed the anonymous documents again, searching for a pattern, a name, a signal of who had sent them. One metadata tag caught our eye, the name Lydia. I blinked. Lydia had been Grandpa's personal accountant for nearly a decade before she abruptly resigned last year. Rumors said she moved to Canada, but we'd never confirmed it. Junie dug deeper and found a burner email address linked to a Northern Oregon server. We sent a message simply asking, "Did Grandpa send you?" The reply came an hour later. I didn't want to get involved, but I couldn't let them bury the truth. I have more. Attached were full ledgers, meeting transcripts, and internal memos from Vinnet Holdings, all of which painted a clear picture. Clarabelle had orchestrated a long-term financial redirection plan, one that turned charitable funds into personal dividends. And Beaumont had signed off on every transaction. This was no longer just about inheritance. I walked into the probate clerk's office with my packet, original copies of Grandpa's sketchpad notes, the notarized document from Horace Ling, the video testimony, and the newly acquired ledgers Lydia had sent. The clerk, a woman in her 60s named Miriam, eyed me cautiously until she saw Grandpa's signature and the notary seal. Her demeanor changed instantly. "You need to see Judge Holbrook," she said. "Now." Within the hour, I was sitting across from the probate judge in a wood-paneled office filled with law books and solemn silence. Judge Holbrook was stern, silver-haired, with eyes that had probably seen every type of family betrayal imaginable. He flipped through the documents slowly, pausing at the video's transcript, his expression unreadable. When he finally spoke, his voice was calm but decisive. "These documents are compelling, especially the notary file and financial attachments. If verified, they significantly challenge the current filed will. Can you stop the estate from being liquidated?" I asked. "If you're right, that's theft." He tapped a pen on the desk. "If you file a motion of injunction before noon today, we can pause all asset disbursements until this matter is fully reviewed." "I'll file it now," I said. He nodded. "Do so. And Mr. Vinnet, be prepared. If you're right, this will get messy." By midday, an official legal injunction had been delivered to Vinnet Holdings and the estate. Clarabelle received it while hosting a tea ceremony for her charity board. The smile vanished from her face when the courier handed her the envelope. Guests looked around awkwardly as she excused herself with tight lips and stormed into the house. Beaumont wasn't far behind. By the time they reached the drawing room, I was already there, sitting calmly, hands folded, the court-stamped papers laid neatly in front of me. Clarabelle slammed her purse on the table. "You arrogant little parasite," she hissed. "Do you know what you've done?" "I've protected Grandpa's legacy," I said, meeting her glare. "You tried to sell off his life's work before the real will could breathe. But it's breathing now." Beaumont looked like he'd aged 10 years in 10 hours. "This is a family matter," he mumbled. "No," I said. "This is a legal matter. And now it's a criminal one, too." Clarabelle scoffed. "Do you think you can just show up with your little envelope and take everything? You're a nobody." "I'm the rightful heir," I replied. "And the judge agrees enough to halt your fire sale." She turned to Beaumont. "We need to call Langston. Now." "Langston can't help you," I said. "Because I also sent copies to the district attorney's office, the state attorney general, and 3 national journalists. One of them already requested an interview." Clarabelle's mouth opened, but no words came out. I leaned forward. "The only thing left to do is confess or burn. But you won't get away with it. Not this time." That evening, the estate buzzed like a disturbed beehive. Guests whispered, staff moved cautiously, and even the piano remained silent. Junie stayed close, reviewing documents with the new attorney I had retained, an independent probate specialist named Sharon Temple, known for her courtroom ferocity and history of unraveling fraudulent wills. She reviewed Grandpa's video 4 times, nodding slowly. "It's gold," she said. "And admissible. They can't spin this out of court." "Can they delay?" "Oh, they'll try," she said. "But we have signatures, logs, and now a timeline. And your status as an immediate blood relative puts you in legal standing to challenge every move they've made." Just as we finished, a knock sounded at the office door. Word had leaked, not through me, but from someone inside, perhaps Aunt Maureen, perhaps Junie, maybe even Lydia's quiet hand. But it had spread fast. I walked downstairs wearing Grandpa's old watch, the one he only said only the future should inherit. My steps felt heavier than they ever had, not from dread, but from the weight of truth finally demanding its stage. The grand hall had been converted into a seating area for the final estate presentation. It was Clarabelle's last attempt at staging control, but she didn't know it would be her undoing. A podium was set, projection screen lit, chairs aligned like courtroom pews. Clarabelle stood behind the podium in a sharp navy suit, her pearls reflecting the lights above, Beaumont at her side wearing a look of hollow confidence. Guests settled, some curious, others already aware that the air reeked not of celebration but of scandal waiting to explode. "Welcome," she began, "and thank you for gathering here today to witness the culmination of a life's work, my husband Charles Vinnett's legacy. As his family and stewards of his estate, we carry forward his vision." Her voice was syrupy smooth, each word calculated, but the tremble in her hand betrayed her. She clicked to the first slide, a picture of Grandpa standing by the vineyard, and smiled. Charles believed in refinement, in tradition, and in continuity. And that's why, in accordance with his final wishes, we are formalizing the estate into the Vinnett Foundation, managed under my son's leadership. I rose from my seat in the third row and said, clearly and without pause, "I object to this presentation and formally request that the audience be shown the truth." A hush fell over the room. Clarabelle's jaw locked. "This isn't a courtroom, Alaric." "No," I said, walking slowly to the front, "but it will be if you don't comply." I turned to the assembled guests, holding up a flash drive. "I have here a video message from Charles Vinnett, recorded just before his passing, as well as legal documents, a notarized will, and sworn affidavit proving that the narrative you've been fed is a lie." Clarabelle raised her hand. "Security, please escort him." "Stop," said a voice from the back. It was Aunt Maureen. She stood, holding the signed affidavit. "This is legal. He's not only entitled to speak, he's the true heir." Murmurs broke out, people turning to one another, eyes darting between the affidavit and the woman behind the podium. Clarabelle took a breath, her smile fracturing. "Alaric has been confused. Grief affects people in unpredictable ways." "What he claims is, play the video," someone said. "Let's hear Charles speak." I plugged the flash drive into the laptop, and the screen flickered. Grandpa appeared, seated in his study, clear-eyed and solemn. "If you're watching this," he began, "then those I trusted most failed me. My name is Charles Vinnett, and I am of sound mind and memory. I created a revised will, dated August 19th, naming my grandson Alaric as the sole heir to my estate, in trust to protect and preserve our legacy with integrity. Anyone saying otherwise is not just lying, they are stealing." Audible gasps filled the room. Grandpa's voice continued, outlining the mismanagement of funds, the betrayal by Clarabelle and Beaumont, and his reasons for cutting them out. "They manipulated, forged, and deceived," he said, "and if they're in this room now denying it, know that I left receipts." The screen went black. No one moved. Beaumont stood abruptly. "This is a setup," he edited that. "Anyone can fake a video." "Is that what you're going with?" I asked. "Even with the notary stamp, Lydia's ledgers, the wire transfers under your name?" He paled. "You don't understand what was at stake." "No," I said. "You never did." Clarabelle stepped forward, attempting to salvage the performance. "Let's not turn this into a spectacle. Charles would be devastated to see the family in chaos." "Charles tried to prevent the chaos," I said. "You caused it. He gave you years of loyalty, and you rewarded him by erasing his wishes." I pulled out the affidavit. "This document, witnessed and notarized, names me executor and heir. Your claim is finished." The estate lawyer, seated in the front row, raised his hand. "I've reviewed the materials. Legally, Alaric has a case, a strong one. If you proceed with this presentation, you'll be in violation of a standing court injunction." Clarabelle froze. The room watched, breathless, as the Queen of Control lost her kingdom in real time. The district attorney's office wasted no time. Within 48 hours of the presentation, a formal investigation into the alleged fraud and forgery was launched. I met with Deputy District Attorney Martin Keller, a no-nonsense woman with sharp eyes and an encyclopedic knowledge of white-collar crime. She laid out the scope of the case: embezzlement, falsification of legal documents, interference with probate proceedings, and conspiracy. Each charge was heavy, each with the potential for years in prison. We went through every document, video, and ledger I'd gathered, cross-referencing timestamps and verifying signatures. Keller was impressed not only by the volume of evidence, but by the meticulous nature of Grandpa's record keeping, which had ultimately sealed their fate. The first hearing was scheduled less than a week away. Clarabelle and Beaumont hired a high-powered legal team, but their past actions and the mountain of evidence stacked against them made their defense look increasingly tenuous. They filed motions to dismiss the injunction and challenge the authenticity of the video, but the courts were unwilling to grant any relief in the face of such compelling proof. As the legal wheels turned, the estate's management was put under temporary federal receivership to prevent further asset dissipation. Clarabelle's lavish lifestyle came under scrutiny. Investigators discovered undeclared offshore accounts, luxury purchases disguised as business expenses, and a pattern of transferring funds to shell companies registered under her name and associates. Beaumont's role as executor was revoked pending the investigation, and he was barred from contacting any estate employees or accessing financial records. The estate staff, many of whom had quietly supported Grandpa's vision, were interviewed extensively. Several revealed that Clarabelle's influence had grown increasingly oppressive over the last 2 years, with threats and intimidation used to keep dissent quiet. The vineyard manager recounted instances where orders to sell prime land came suddenly and without Grandpa's approval, often accompanied by veiled threats to resign if questioned. Through it all, I maintained contact with Lydia, whose insider knowledge became invaluable. She guided me through complex financial documents, pointing out discrepancies and fraudulent entries that even the most seasoned investigators might miss. Her courage to come forward was both inspiring and sobering. She told me about the pressure she faced when Clarabelle discovered her whistleblowing intentions, including threats to ruin her career and reputation. As the case moved forward, I found myself not only fighting for my rightful inheritance, but also for the legacy of honesty, integrity, and hard work Grandpa had tried to protect. The family estate was more than real estate and money. It was a symbol of values, and I was determined to restore it. On the morning of the first hearing, I arrived at the courthouse with my legal team and supporters, including Junie and Aunt Maureen. The courtroom was packed with media, family members, and curious onlookers. Clarabelle and Beaumont entered separately, their faces pale but defiant. The prosecutor presented a detailed summary of the charges and the evidence, laying out a narrative of deception and betrayal that stunned the room. Clarabelle's defense attorney attempted to discredit the evidence, calling the video fabricated and accusing the prosecution of relying on circumstantial proof. But when Lydia testified, under protection and with her identity partially concealed, the courtroom shifted. Her firsthand account of internal documents, the intercepted will, and the financial manipulations broke through the defense's claims. Witness after witness corroborated her story. After days of intense testimony, the judge ruled to proceed with the trial, denying motions to dismiss the charges. The judge also ordered a temporary freeze on all estate transactions, ensuring no assets could be moved or sold during the process. The public reaction was overwhelming. Articles praised Grandpa's foresight and Alaric's determination, while Clarabelle and Beaumont became cautionary tales of greed and deceit. The final chapter of this family saga unfolded on a crisp autumn morning, the kind of morning that feels like a gentle reset for everything it touches. The courtroom was quieter than during the trial, but every seat was still filled with eager eyes, reporters, and the faces of those who had followed this story from the start. I stood there, not as the invisible grandson anymore, but as the rightful heir ready to accept not just the estate but the responsibility that came with it. After months of legal battles, witness testimonies, and emotional tolls, the judge read the verdict aloud. Clarabelle and Beaumont were found guilty of fraud, conspiracy, and forgery. The sentence was severe: years of probation, heavy fines, and mandated restitution to the family trust. The relief in the room was palpable, but what struck me most was the silence that followed the announcement, a silence filled with the weight of what had been lost and what could still be rebuilt. I looked at the faces of my allies, Junie, Aunt Maureen, Lydia, and my attorney Sharon. We had done more than reclaim an estate. We had restored truth and justice to a legacy that had almost been erased. Walking out of the courthouse, the sun warmed my face as if nature itself was welcoming me back to a place I'd always belonged. I thought about Grandpa, about how he had left breadcrumbs for me, expecting me to find my way through the darkness. I realized then that legacy isn't just about land or money. It's about integrity, courage, and the willingness to stand for what is right even when it feels impossible. Back at the estate, I made a decision. I wouldn't live in the grand mansion left behind. Instead, I transformed it into the Vinnet Archive Institute, a place where history, art, and learning could thrive, and where underprivileged youth could find the resources and inspiration Grandpa had always wanted them to have. The mansion's walls, once filled with secrets and shadows, now echoed with laughter, creativity, and hope. The vineyard became a community-supported farm, a place that gave back to the people who had lived alongside the estate for generations. At the grand opening of the Institute, standing before a crowd that included neighbors, friends, staff, and students, I felt a deep sense of peace. I held a letter in my hand, one of Grandpa's last handwritten notes, discovered in a hidden compartment by Junie. It read, "You didn't need to fight fire with fire. Kindness is the true victory." I shared those words with everyone, reminding them that though we had faced betrayal, greed, and injustice, the future we build together must be founded on respect and compassion. In the weeks that followed, I received messages from people who said that watching this story unfold had inspired them to confront their own family struggles, to seek truth, and to believe in their worth. I realized then that Grandpa's greatest gift wasn't wealth, it was hope. Hope that even when overlooked, even when silenced, one could find a way to rise. That legacy isn't inherited by blood alone, but earned through actions that honor those who came before us and pave the way for those who will follow. This story ends not with bitterness or revenge, but with the quiet power of justice restored and a future reimagined. The last piece of silence was broken by the gentle clapping of a child's laughter echoing through the halls, a sound I hope will never fade. The end. If you enjoyed hearing my story, please hit like and subscribe so you don't miss any future videos like this. I'd really love to know, what part of the plot surprised you the most? Did you expect the twist with the will or the way things unfolded at the end? Also, let me know where you're watching from and what you think about family drama like this. Drop your thoughts in the comments below. I read every single one and can't wait to hear from you. Your support means a lot and helps me bring more stories to life.